Kia ora koutou, whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hearing News. Did you go crack, crack, crack?
Yeah.
Are you getting old?
Like way more than I was expecting. My fingers still work, so I guess it's okay. But I hope that came through, chat. I hope you heard my bones breaking.
I didn't hear it. I started a new routine at the gym today. They've got me doing upper body stuff, and I'm sore here, and I'm sore here, and I'm sore across here. I need a little massage. Sherry, can you come around afterwards?
No, I am washing my hair.
I'm sure your partner would be fine with that. That wouldn't start the rumours at all, would it? So good to be back with you guys. Hey, listen, Chew, we've had our first, and I actually haven't told this person yet, but I've seen them in the chat already. We've had our first person, NZYTP. Don't know what NZYTP's name is. You can tell us in the chat if you want, NZ. Make something based on something we've said and sent it to us. You know how I watched Two Bears, One Cave, yeah?
Yeah.
Two Bears, One Cave is a couple of comedians, and when they started it off, they were like, we need a theme song, and they just threw it to their audience, and their audience sent them in, a half dozen theme songs. And because they have millions of followers, you get it. But we talked last night about could someone convert a Christopher Luxon image into something else? You'll probably remember what I'm saying. If others don't, I'll leave that as a surprise. And NZYTP has done it on some level and sent it to us. And I haven't told him or her this yet. Last time I started referring to Spiderhoof as a him, and she laughed because it's a her. I don't know what NZ is. I'm an enigma. There you go in the chat. NZYTP says I'm an enigma. So neither male nor female, just an enigma. There you go. So NZ, we're going to play your thing tonight. I hope that's okay. I'm sure it is because you sent it to me. And it's pretty cool actually that we talk about something last night, then someone else and say, come on, do this, and someone does it. It's pretty choice. But also the shows come together tonight quite interestingly because there's there's a lot of stories to talk about. One of them is the police. And I know lots of people watching might not be, huge fans in general of the police. And I get it. I'm with you. I understand that there is problematic situations via that. But also, we get, this is the angle I'm looking at it for, Chewy. We get told by this, the party of law and order, all these things are going to happen. And all these things that they use like as a political pawn is something that's AWN, not ORN, is they require the police to do all these things. And then they shit on them. So I'm really keen to look into this and investigate this as a more about a hypocrisy from the government than necessarily a huge support for the police. I think people should be paid, a fair wage and all that completely and utterly. So I think it's an interesting perspective. But then also the most interesting thing today, and I didn't find out about this till very late in the afternoon, was that this government could be in breach of international obligations by ramming through laws under urgency.
If only that had been predicted ahead of time.
And it's come out now, and it's to do with free trade agreements, and it's really, really interesting, really interesting. And then also the pièce de résistance tonight is Brooke van Velden going to overhaul and change employment law. And all she's talked about is how good it will be for the businesses. Honestly, it's like talk about just saying the thing out loud that's supposed to be a secret. Or we're going to play a piece, I think, off One News. And all she does was to say how this is going to benefit the business. I'm like, the left. We tried to educate the left politicians on this last year. It's like when the right says we're the party of CEOs, you go, yes, you are. We're the party of the factory floor worker. They're screaming from the rooftop. They are the party of the business owners, right? Left, you have to be the party of the workers. That's how you started. Take it back, please. It's just exquisite. It's not an exquisite outcome, but it's exquisite how they're not playing in the shadows anymore. They're out and they're proud. They've all come out of their right wing closets and they're out and they're proud and they're just going for it. It's really, really interesting. Anyway, let's do something first of all. NZYTP is obviously someone who follows and sent me a lovely email today. Appreciate that. If you want to get a hold of us, bighearynews@gmail.com. Sent a little video through. Actually, I'll read the video. I'll read the email. It says, I was chopping up the Luxon video from breakfast for my own amusement the other day and then watched the episode of BHN last night where you discussed it. I stole your idea. So we'll just leave it with that, and I'll show the video, and it's pretty funny. It's pretty good. So credit to NZYTP. Have a look.
The $1 billion Prime Minister's rock solid. Good morning, Luxon.
Well, and I'd just ask you to focus on the people that actually matter here, which is landlords.
Problem.
What I'd say to you is that what we're doing here is we're making sure that life gets easier for landlords. What I'd say to you very clearly is that
I'm just really not hearing.
That's a good thing for New Zealand.
Nicola and I are rock solid. That's quite a substantial chunk.
Well, I would dispute that very strongly. It's actually declined in growth in the last 3 of the last 4 quarters.
Not so keen. How'd you get it so wrong? Can you still say you're rock solid?
I'm incredibly hard.
But I'm asking you for evidence. How come you got it so wrong?
Anna, come on. Yeah, sorry, you're mixing the drinks. That is incoherent,
business.
what you just said. Yeah, it's less attractive for insane, slugged. No, what I mean is I don't have any mortgages, Anna, and end up spending a heap of money on drugs.
There's no actual evidence of that, is there?
And what we've said very clearly is I'm very fortunate I don't have any mortgages.
Your tax break for landlords, $800 million.
And what I'd say to you is previous government, downward pressure on rents. We've inherited an economy, downward pressure on rents. The previous government, and obviously we've inherited it, downward pressure on rents, no doubt about it. If you own New Zealand versus owning a rental property, you would actually be able to use it as a deductible, a legitimate business expense. What this is about is making $170 per week.
Are you saying landlords would seriously have houses?
Why would you own a house? It's a dumb idea. It's a stupid idea. Rents. I don't have any mortgages. Wasted.
I hate Luxon.
Appreciate it.
So you got the little bit at the end there, the little bit there, our little chef's case, the little Thanos there that came
amazing. We do have to point out that the Logical Slayer, it has actually clocked that that may have been slightly edited.
We were trying to put this information out there, weren't we, to fool people.
We'll keep trying.
We'll keep trying. We're just not smart enough. They caught us. Something else that happened today that I wanted to share is I did a little bit of mathematics. And some people fell into the trap. Let me just put it that way. I'll put up my tweet first of all. And for those of you on the audio podcast, I will read it. It says, here's why I like maths. Under the last national government, median rent went from $300 per week to $420 per week when they left. That's a 40% increase. Under Labor, median rent was $420 at the start of their term and to $580 at the end. That's a 38% increase. So now I knew straight away people would be going, well, it's 9 years versus 6. But if you have a look down here, these are the average weekly rents since I think the early 90s. And see how the incline is basically constant. So it's basically constant. There's a bit of an uptick towards the end, but see here, there's a flattening. That would have been the global financial crisis where a bunch of people went bankrupt, and it basically climbs pretty statically. And so what we can't do is we can't say exactly what would have happened had they got a third term. But the point being, Labor had a better result with rental increases than the last national government. Don't be fooled by the $170 shtick. Dig into the data. And then what I've said is, does anybody notice a consistent trend of the last 15 years? This is not a Labor issue. This is a housing issue. And both Labor and National are yet to solve it. So because average rents have gone up, that means that 40%, 38% increase feels like a lot more, because it is, but percentage-wise, under a Labor government versus under a national government, it hasn't increased by the same amount. Yes, I know it's 6 versus 9 years. I get all of that, but that is the raw data at the moment. So what does that say? That says we need journalists to dig a bit deeper where Mr. Luxon says 170, because when we do this all the time, when we use it by percentages or whatever, we get the true data, which is why when someone goes, they've wasted $25 million, and then that's out of, I think it's our GDP like 250 billion. When you look at it in the scale beside what it's out of, it's a very different story. Sorry, Chewie, I was talking too much. You go, sir.
No, I was just going to say, isn't that what I was saying? Neither party has shifted the needle on rent. Neither party has been brave enough to make a transformative change in our housing market and our rental market, and because it's terrifying. Like, if people, I can understand some of the fear, right? If a whole bunch of people with mortgages suddenly go into negative equity, it's fucking end of days.
Yep.
You know, and I don't have an answer for that because I'm not a fucking economist. But what I do know is that something has to happen with our supply, and something has to happen to protect renters, and there's very little being done on either side of the political spectrum to do that, because the rents keep rising, they keep going up, and the quality is, I mean, the healthy home standard certainly changed a lot of things, but they're still not great houses for such a cold, wet country. Our housing standards are bullshit.
Yeah. Yep. If you follow me on Twitter, go read it. It's a bit of fun reading that, because as I said, I knew the first, I nearly put it in there. Before you say 6 years and 9 years, it's actually about that trend. And that trend is very, 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 very regular. Look at it. And this is from data rapper Ed McKnight, OPES partner, and the source is MBIE. Clint actually jumped on board as well. This is interesting from Clint. So Clint Smith, who was with us last week. Also, the MBIE bond data isn't a great source. It's only looking at rents listed on newly lodged bonds, doesn't capture continuing tenancies, which tend to have a slower rent rise. Kāinga Ora and CHP houses, usually no bond. Renting to family and friends, frequently no bond. And I agree with all that, and Clint's right. However, this is still comparing that new data today versus that new data 10 years ago. So both may be inaccurate representation, but they're both, it's like for like, you know. So yeah. Because like, you know what it's like, whānau, if you're in a renting situation, you're renting out a house, the landlord, if it's a person who owns the house that you deal with, they often will not increase the rent by as much as they could or should or would, or they leave it the same. I've got friends in Mosgiel who I think haven't had maybe they have, but haven't had much of a rent increase in like 4 or 5 years. It's because they're just covering the mortgage for the people, and that they're happy with it. And it might have been a little bit of a mortgage increase, but certainly not to market rates, that's for sure. Those people,
I mean, the best landlord that I had, and I stayed in this place in Wellington for I think 5 or 6 years. He didn't put the rent up once.
Yeah.
Because we were there, we were consistent, we never missed rent. But again, that's when we talk about unicorn landlords, like that's my unicorn. Is that this is a guy that didn't consistently put up the rent every opportunity that he had.
Yeah. No, so, I've been a landlord in the past, and I always took the opinion it's more work for me to find another tenant, so I should treat the one I've got like gold. And so if I'm earning enough out of them to do what I have to do, then that's fine. So yeah, that's what that's how I sort of operated. Well, I'm not a landlord anymore, but in the past when I have been, that's what we did. So
absolutely.
So speaking of landlords, speaking of business, speaking of deductible interest, etc., the party of business. The unions, and we've got someone from one of the unions coming on tomorrow night, I think, but the unions are calling this horrific. National and ACT and New Zealand First are calling this, let's sort out those employment laws. But like I said, see if you can spot the moment where Brooke van Velden says out loud what the right's supposed to hide, which is, we don't care about the workers, we just want this to work for business.
Employment laws are set to be ripped up as the government sets off in a new direction. Workplace Relations Minister Brooke van Velden's unveiled her plans for the sector. She's looking to rev up the gig economy by making it easier for businesses to employ short-term contractors and freelance workers. Health and safety laws are also set to be overhauled, with the minister saying,
so already make it easier for businesses.
She wants to give more clarity to workers and their employers by focusing on what's causing workers harm, not on compliance that serves no purpose.
How about that? Let's not focus on compliance. Let's just see why they're getting hurt. And then when the business has to change something because they're being hurt, that would be compliance. But we'll do that after they get hurt, not before. It's a smart way of doing it. That's really, this government, the tagline should be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. National 2024.
And the Troubled and Complicated Holidays Act will be reformed after years of statutory entitlement and underpayment issues.
Who is it problems for, Chewy? It's the businesses that complain, whinge and moan about having to pay time and a half or give a day in lieu, or both. So if they're going to reform it, and if this NACTNZ government is talking about it's problematic, is there any part of you which is thinking they are going to find problems that they're going to solve for the workers? Because there's no part of me. And if they're going to solve problems for the business, that doesn't sound like it'll be very good for the worker.
I have two things in mind that could be fixed with the Holidays Act.
Sure.
And as far as what holidays are available. Do I believe that Brooke has those in mind? No, I don't. Traditionally, ACT has gone, workers should get X amount of holidays per year to be taken at a time of their choosing. So I wonder if that's going to come out. And that, again, that sounds great in theory. But one of the things, I'm going to say this as a retail worker, one of the things about actually having proper public holidays are those are the times where me and my friends are not working at the same time.
100%.
It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
And the idea of just having X amount of holiday days that you can just cash out of time, it means that there is no set time where shops are just closed and people can just, it's not a retail holiday, it's just a fucking holiday.
Well, there's only 3 days that's the case now, isn't it? It's Easter Sunday, Easter Friday, Christmas Day. That's it.
Yep. So I bet my idea for the Holiday Act, does she actually mention what she wants to change with the Holiday Act?
Shall we get into the story and find out what?
Yeah, let's find out, and let's see how it matches up with the things that I would change.
The minister says she'll now go out and talk to those affected. The unions, though, have summed up the changes.
It's funny. She says she'll talk to those who have been affected. She doesn't mean the workers.
No, I don't think I'm going to hear from her.
Changes in one word: horrifying. Business correspondent Katie Bradford has more.
Fighting to be recognised as an employee, this former Uber driver took the company to court.
We're not treated fairly by Uber. We don't get any holiday pay, no sick leave, no time off, and no compensation if we don't get enough money to, at least to pay for our vehicles.
The court ruled in their favour, but Uber is appealing. It's cases like that which the minister says shows the law is broken.
What we're hoping to do as a government.
I'm just going to go back to the start of her talking. And I know I've said it twice already, but just listen to her fighting for the worker, right? Remember, employment laws, business and worker. Listen to the words she used and see if you can find how she's going to fight for the worker.
Broken.
What we're hoping to do as a government is make sure that businesses are certain about employment agreements versus contracting arrangements and what their rights and obligations are.
But unions are...
Anything to do with workers in there as well? Nothing. She has a little chat in a couple of minutes. Let's keep going.
Worried it'll be at the cost of workers' rights.
We're seeing this total attack on workers, which is completely unwarranted, particularly with workers who aren't even earning the minimum wage.
Tax app Henry works with sole traders and says while some are vulnerable, most are not.
This is 20% of the workforce that spans from freelancers, tradespeople, health and wellness workers, real estate, film and TV, and white-collar contractors in government.
Health and safety laws are also in for a shake-up. They were last changed following the Pike River mining disaster.
Somebody who's working in the construction sector and says actually the added cost of doing all this training to make sure that somebody is up to scratch to be on a construction site is so cost prohibitive that I can't actually afford to bring on another staff member.
Businesses.
So I'll translate. So we're going to have, remember after Cave Creek, is that right? Cave Creek? We're going to have less qualified people who are tradies working, building the next platform to look off. Because what she's just said is the cost that's prohibitive to the business training these people properly, we want to get rid of. I'll play it again, shall we? I'll play it again, right? Because that's what she says. The cost for the business to train people correctly, we're going to get rid of that. So what does that mean? People aren't going to be trained correctly or trained as well.
Somebody who's working in the construction sector and says actually the added cost of doing all this training to make sure that somebody is up to scratch to be on a construction site is so cost prohibitive that I can't actually afford to bring on another staff member.
Well, she means properly qualified. And Pike River. Sorry, I got my Cave Creek and Pike River mixed up. Pike River. So We want to make it so businesses can use contractors, pay them less, not train them as well, and that's going to make everybody happier. That's what we're looking at right now. And once we go down the contractor line and the sole operator line, then there's no sick leave, there's no holiday pay, there's no days in lieu, none of that kind of stuff, because it's a contractor, which is what the story at the start was about Uber drivers. You want to jump in on anything, shall we? Should we get to the end?
Yeah, like any one of these demons talking about the gig economy just gives me the shits instantly, because it's no sick pay, it's not having to do PAYE, no holidays. It is just, you're responsible for everything. And we've had court cases in New Zealand, not just Uber. We're talking about courier drivers and that sort of thing, where their working conditions were abominable. And the companies that were employing them just went heads off, going, they're contractors. It's up to them. We don't have any duty or care or responsibility towards them. And her talking about lower costs of compliance and construction. Yeah, it's real expensive just spending the basic amount of time to make sure someone doesn't fucking nail gun their colleague or drop a rack of pipes off a 15-story building. But I'm sure if we just roll the dice and we only pay for the occasional worker's funeral, it'll all balance out in the end.
And it's always interesting that when they talk about it, they talk about those blue-collar workers. I wonder if she'd be happy enough with the brain surgeon that has to go in and remove a family member's tumour to have not done those other 3 courses that was required. I'm sure that wouldn't be the case, but the expendable humans, let's not worry about them so much. That's the vibe I get, Joey. Yeah.
Right. Lower socioeconomic, brown, migrant workers. Don't spend any time on them. They're disposable people. Don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it, Pat. It'll be fine.
Okay.
Feel the previous government didn't get the balance right.
And what you want is not just more and more rules. What you want is to understand that the rules are working and that people can go to work, be healthy, safe and productive.
I would really be looking.
So what they want is fewer and fewer rules, right? I mean, we talked the last couple of months about the equal and opposite. What you don't want is more and more rules. So what you do want, the other side of the coin, is fewer and fewer rules.
And productive.
I would really be looking to the other coalition partners to make sure that the policy that's implemented is actually reflective of what the government wants and not just ACT party policy.
All adding up to a nightmare for worker advocates.
Absolutely nothing short of horrifying. I'm concerned that there may be an erosion of rights.
Do you think workers have too many rights at the moment?
No, I don't. I actually think we can have a workplace environment that works for business owners and for workers.
Some big changes on the way for workplaces this electoral term.
As long as the business owners are the apex of that conversation. It can work for both, but the most important thing is to get it working for business owners first. And when that happens, it sounds good. Now, Anita Rosentreater, is booked in to come on with us tomorrow night at 9:00. So that's the person who was calling it horrific, is going to come on and tell us all about it tomorrow night at 9. That's been booked into the moment. Fingers crossed it all pans out. Chewy, sir, your thoughts?
Yeah, so there was no mention of what she would change with the Holidays Act, right? So I'll mention the 2 things. Overhauled. Just a general overhaul. Just vibes. Okay, cool. So they're probably hinting at the fact of the things that they've talked about before.
Yeah.
Look, there's a chance for a government to fix up something that they haven't fixed up since the early 90s, right? And that's Easter trading. Now, for anyone that works in retail or works a job that would cover Easter weekend, it is a dog's breakfast. It is the hardest to understand weekend as far as, do I get paid for this? So Easter Friday, easy, time and a half. Easter Sunday,
nothing.
The shop, because when they set this piece of legislation out, all the shops were closed on Sunday anyway. There was no Sunday trading. There was barely Saturday trading at that point. And nobody has changed that, right? So the Easter weekend coming up, if you want to get paid for your normal rostered Sunday shift that you can't work because the shop's closed and it's not your fault, you have to apply for a day of leave.
Yeah, I guess it's an easy fix, though. They could either just make it clear that there is one anomaly, which is the Sunday, Easter Sunday through the year, which is a day and a half in time in lieu, and maybe take it away from the Monday. I know it would be a different ruling, but you could do that in legislation.
Yeah.
You could turn Easter Sunday into the public and say for this one weekend it's different because of tradition, history, and the Monday is no longer a public holiday. Nothing applies for Monday.
Yep. And the other one is Anzac Day.
Yeah, the half day.
Half day for Anzac Day has always rubbed me the wrong way. I'm lucky my last couple of employers and my current one certainly understand that I do not want to work Anzac Day. I don't think it's appropriate. But they need to sort that out. Like a full day off for Anzac Day, I don't see why that would be controversial. But it's one thing that personally rubs me the wrong way, that you see Anzac Day sales, you see a half day of trading. We don't even give a full day's commemoration to any New Zealander that's gone off and fought and died in war. Is madness to me. It has always rubbed me the wrong way. But there's been, like, that should be, I assume, an easy win for a right-wing government, right? Nobody's touching it. Nobody's touched it
because Defence
for
Force,
decades.
You know, thank you for your service, all that kind of stuff like the Americans do. Yep. Yeah, I mean, the concept of having like 11 days holiday, use them anytime you like, is an okay concept. But like you said, Chewy, the reason that like Christmas, New Year's, those things work is they're when all the family's off. Kids are off school, take time off the family, often some of the warmest times during the year, and everybody's celebrating. Could you imagine that? What would happen to the family aspect of those times of the year if half the people were working normally and going back and forth? Mind you, in saying that as well, I guess to take those 11 days, what you're then implying is those Christmas, New Year days would no longer be public holidays. They'd be acknowledged as a public holiday, but not as a holiday, or a public day, but not as a holiday. I think that's kind of what they do in America most of the time, because they have far fewer public holidays than we do. Like, I don't know, Martin Luther King Day is not a day off, is it? It's just a day that's acknowledged, and then they have holidays separate to it. Yeah. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. It's just crazy. And it's, if it isn't just a set in stone holiday day, again, that shifts the balance of power towards the employer, not the worker.
Yeah.
Hey boss, can I have this day off? No, they're blackout dates. We're too busy. You can't. All of that sort of thing. It's just, there is no harm in having 1 or 2 days every now and then where shops are closed.
Yeah. Yep. No,
and
I agree.
And like when we talk about businesses going, oh, I can't handle the compliance costs of it. You know, there's going to be X amount of public holidays per year. Manage your costs. Manage your payroll.
Or don't open. Like I can remember, for those youngins out there, you may not know this, but at one stage there was double time on public holidays, and then they took it away and there was nothing. You could have day in lieu, but it wasn't time and a half. And then they brought it back, the time and a half day in lieu. So, which, as Chewy said, it very clearly means if you work on a Monday, that's your regular rostered day, and you're entitled to that day off if a holiday falls on the Monday. If you work it, you get a day in lieu, which means you bank that holiday for later, and they've got to pay you time and a half. If it's not your regular rostered day, but you work it, you get time and a half. Now, my argument always was when they brought these fees back, and it was all the cafes going, we're going to add a surcharge because we can't afford this. I was like, you know what? I guarantee you when it went from double time to nothing, all of a sudden your product wasn't cheaper. So I refuse to go to cafes that have a surcharge on those days, because you don't get to, on one hand, pocket the change when it went away and now add more on because it's come back. As you say, Chewy, you budget for it or you don't open. If you can't open without a surcharge, don't open. Simple.
Yeah, I'm the same. I refuse to go to a cafe or business that charges a surcharge, because if you can't manage your costs to that degree, I don't begrudge any business that chooses to give their workers a holiday. But yeah, you spread your costs out of over the whole year. You don't go the government's making us pay our workers on this day, and it's so much more expensive to make a coffee. Just fucking work it out.
Yeah, well, don't open.
Yeah.
Because if what you're telling us, and this is why I don't actually believe it, if what you're telling us, if that 10% surcharge is the difference between you opening on that day and not opening on that day, you are not making enough money to have a business. That's not enough money to be a viable business. That's just you clipping the ticket and using an excuse. If your difference between being open and being shut is 10%, you should be shut, because you will be very, very soon if that was honest, which is why I don't believe it's honest. Also, thanks for the super chat, Junkrig. Junkrig Sailor, $5 says, Brooke is a silly little person with no life experience. How she was given such an important portfolio is beyond belief. Well, that's what happens when you people voted in this government. They gave them a mandate to do this kind of stuff. All right. Speaking of voting,
this is again your notice that if you are a wage earner, if you are a worker, if you do not own the business that you work in, join a union.
Yeah.
Because things might be good now, things might seem okay now. Maybe you trust the business that you work for. I certainly do. But things can change very quickly. And when legislation has changed, maybe things aren't so nice for you anymore.
Yeah.
And maybe you're lucky and privileged to be in a job where you don't have to worry about that. There's a lot of workers in your industry that aren't that lucky. So join a union. If you need any further prodding to do that, Kiwi Rob in the chat, who we all love and appreciate, doesn't like unions. It might drive him crazy.
I think
that might be worth the admission.
The one thing I would disagree with you on, Chewy, is when you said people might have a comfortable and sweet job and they might not need it. What I would say is you might not need it yet, because sometimes those jobs turn just as toxic as I've told 2 people in the last month to join a union, both sort of in entry level jobs, minimum wage jobs, and both are having issues with employers and or people who work there. And they just kind of go, well, I don't want to give up the 3% or whatever it is. I'm like, well, that's what you need to do, because if this turns to custard, you'll have lawyers on your behalf fighting for you, not just you being, ridden roughshod.
I have been in that position. Like, I have always been very pro union, right? But when you're in a job and everything's going right, you don't think about it. You just put it over here. Unions are good. I like unions, but I'm not going to join one. And then by the time it's like, oh, fuck, maybe I better join the union, it's too late. It's too late. And I would have had legal support in those circumstances.
Yeah.
They would have had my back. And I had to do it myself. And it sucked. And it really, really sucked.
And I think most unions won't backdate things if you're not a member, because if they did that, then no one would join until they needed them. So you got to just join a union today, and then if something comes up in a year, you're covered. If it comes up in a year and you then join, I'm pretty sure they must have something in place that goes. Maybe they'll give you some advice, but they won't give you as much resource, because if they did, then everyone would just wait until they got in trouble and then they'd join. Okay, speaking of being in trouble, government might be breaking some international obligations with their use of rushing things through Parliament and with their cancellation of kind of official policy checking. Really interesting story. This really interesting, kind of a bit political nerdy. I mean, for a lot of people they might not be, but for me, I'm like, this is going to be fascinating to watch over the next few days.
News Hub can reveal Treasury warned the government it would breach international obligations by suspending proper advice on policy to meet its 100-day goals.
Remember, the expert advice we're getting is it will give downward pressure. The expert advice we're getting is it will give downward pressure. Like we've said many, many times, they scream from the rooftops the expert advice they're taking when it suits their narrative, and when it's like this and it goes against the narrative, they discard it and they undercut it. They actually try and make it seem, irrelevant. Expert advice said, don't do this.
The Prime Minister denies he's trampling on democracy.
But as political editor Jenna Lynch reports, Labour's leader is calling the coalition a dictatorship, a word he previously refused to use to describe China's President Xi Jinping.
riding a blue Nami to power.
Thank you, thank you.
And surfing the wave all over the sands of democracy.
Do you use one of those little blue pills to get a blue Nami? I'm just wondering. Is that those little, maybe? No? I don't know.
Reached for hope, and you have voted for change.
That vote for change is what Christopher Luxon is leaning on to defend his government's record use of parliamentary urgency, skipping steps in the democratic process to pass reforms in time to meet his self-imposed deadline of 100 days.
That's really important too, self-imposed. As we've said, this doesn't mean anything. It's actually an Americanization of politics. Americans always talk about the first 100. It means nothing. And as we've said before, the only reason they've done it is so Labor couldn't go, you missed your self-imposed deadline. But there might be some very real consequences for that.
We are a government that is here to get things done.
Along with putting Parliament in urgency and skipping public input through select committees for some legislation, the government also...
Just little things like that, you know, skipping public submissions and going into urgency, just little minor things like that. But there's one thing that's even bigger.
The government also decided to skip the official advice step, suspending what are known as regulatory impact statements on some 100-day policies. Advice released under the Official Information Act shows Treasury officials warning the urgency of a policy proposal is not in itself sufficient grounds for an exemption from such advice. Luxon denies that's trampling on democracy.
Not at all. What we're doing is, where we've had clear positions in opposition and where we've campaigned on policies through the election campaign, we're moving very quickly.
The advice also shows that the government was warned that New Zealand had international obligations, saying specifically under the NZ-UK Free Trade Agreement, New Zealand must endeavour to carry out proportionate impact assessments of proposed major regulatory...
So this is part of a free trade agreement with the UK. Now, what is the downstream effect from this? I don't know. Could it mean that they're in breach of it and it could be withdrawn? I guess it could. But what it does is it gives the UK ammunition to use it should they want to do something like pull out of it. Because if this puts us in breach of an international agreement, that's pretty big, Chewy. That's pretty big and significant. And it's all because they don't want to listen to advice that they don't want to take. That's actually what it's all about. I want to be able to go la 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 to the stuff I don't want to hear, and so they've done it.
It's amazing how quick I can get a job done if I ignore everything I'm being told while I try to do it. And it's also amazing how if I don't listen to the people around me that are telling me that what I'm doing is reckless, stupid, that's not in the training manual. Why are people screaming? The job that I'm trying to do falls apart on me. But yeah, I get it done quick though.
Yeah.
Like giving people 2 days to submit on something or less in the case of the return of pseudoephedrine. They gave people 12 hours for that. Is just insulting. And where they've dodged other things like the Māori Health Authority, they read that through under urgency so it wouldn't be in front of the courts. They've ignored this. The first 100 days is an Americanism that National co-opted.
Yep.
There is no requirement for them to come in with a hiss and a roar like this. And look, if Labor came in and did the same thing, I'd be saying the same thing. I have huge issues with urgency. This shit is not what it's for.
No, it's for the Christchurch earthquake. Yep. It's for the mosque shootings. It's for the cyclone in Auckland. That's what urgency is for. Not, I got to get it all done within 100 days.
Or there's shit that we've got to do before we go away for Christmas.
Yeah.
Like, all governments have done that. I don't like that either. If you can't do a proper job, if you can't do it democratically, I'm sorry, your job didn't get done. Pick it up when you come back. You know, this is not what urgency's for.
This goes a little bit worse as well because I think they start talking about the Bill of Rights. Let's get back to it.
Measures.
I've got no doubt that we have not met those. We have met those obligations. Yep.
For policies that didn't receive adequate advice, Treasury recommended a post-implementation review 1 year after the legislation passes to ensure it meets standards. But
that seems reasonable, right? You've done this. You haven't had it checked out. So how about then what we do is we give a 1 year checkup to see if you did end up reaching the targets that you wanted to reach. But what do you think Luxon said to that?
Luxon refused to commit to even that today.
Are you committed to a one-year review of every policy that didn't get proper regulatory advice?
Again, we make no apologies. We got elected with a mandate for change and to getting things done.
Winning an election does not entitle you to act like a dictatorship.
Dictatorship. That's a term Chris Hipkins wouldn't even use for Chinese President Xi Jinping.
That is what this government are doing, ramming law changes through that they did not campaign on.
I make no apologies for getting things done for New Zealanders. I was elected.
Getting things done his way.
For
Jenna
New
Lynch,
Zealanders,
News Hub.
For New Zealanders, he says, like the change in the smoking regulations ran through under urgency.
Yeah,
like
and
that.
Just because
Who
you're
asked for
getting,
that?
like imagine you were building a house. You can build it fast and cut corners and don't apologize as a builder for getting things done. Yeah, but you're not following safety. Oh, but I'm getting it done. Like, you can get things done fast. I'm not going to say or you can get things done well, because I'm sure sometimes you can be fast and good, but it appears that these guys are getting things rammed through fast. They're more excited about the speed of what they're doing than the quality of what they're doing. And that's why we're getting bad legislation.
I got this house built in record time. Sure, 15 builders died, and I saved time by not doing a foundation. But your roof's on, here's your keys, you'll never see me again. Lights.
Give me my check. Yeah, so it's just, it feels, it's just ludicrous, eh? It's just ludicrous. And it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes, because if you are in breach of an international obligation, what happens next? What happens? I mean, like, does that then go before some kind of international treaty or some sort of international board? Or
look, Pat, I wouldn't worry. Just chill. You're always going down this doom spiral, right? We're a trading company that exports all around the world. There's no reason that we need to stick to our trading agreements. They're just bits of paper with words on. They mean nothing. We can just pick and choose. We don't need to consider what our trading partners care about, and I'm sure nothing bad will happen. So just chill out, man. Take the rest of the week off. It's fine.
So like Melissa Lee was talking about, if TV3 just disappears, just go watch Sky. So in other words, if the UK free trade agreement falls over, just do one with a different country. Just get another one. They're not hard. Piece of cake. Just do it again.
Yeah.
Frosty says on his $5 super chat, thank you for that. What are users' thoughts on a lot of political commentators comparing Luxon and this government as a whole to Robert Muldoon's government? Chewy's one of Chewy's favourite topics, isn't it? Chewy, off you go.
Well, I won't have the memory of New Zealand's last socialist prime minister be smirched by such a comparison. Like, outside of the fact that Luxon is bald, I don't really see that comparison. I see a closer comparison with this government, with the national government of the early 90s, with Ruth Richardson as the finance minister. That same sort of meanness, that same sort of, we've got such a crushing victory here, we can do whatever the fuck we want. And I think the risk here is, as much as we might tease some of these guys for being fucking incompetent and just not being very good at this, the damage that they are doing is damage that we will have to be undoing potentially over the next decade or more. And like, that's why that's why people are so bent out of shape, right? Like, for a lot of governments, you go, okay, there's some things I don't agree with here, and it's usually sort of button issues and that sort of thing, but they won't be too bad. This national government has shocked me with the force and speed and severity of the changes that they're making. There's no real consideration of the long-term effects. And I keep on saying this, they are a short-term thinking government. They are not thinking of the consequences of what they're doing. And that means we're going to have to be untangling them. I hope to high heaven that this is a one-term government. But that, as you pointed out, Pat, that historically does not happen in New Zealand. That means we have to fight very, very hard to make it happen.
Although
we can't just trust the universe will agree with us. We need to be active.
We do hear, well, this was from Bomber, and it's a bit inside scuttlebutt, so who knows how accurate it is. Not that he's not telling the truth, but he's being told that there's chat amongst some of the people that might know that once Winston leaves the deputy leadership, he will burn this thing down. And if he does that, who knows? You know what? It would be devastating for National to be a one-term government. I mean, in America, a one-term president is a little bit embarrassing, but you're still the president. You know, it's like, it's still okay to be nominated for an Oscar, even if you don't win one. You'd rather win one, but it's still quite an honor to be nominated. A one-term president is you know, it's not the worst in the world, but it's a little bit looked down on. A one-term under MMP government would be devastating for the, I don't know, what do you call it? The mana of these guys, or their story, or their legacy. It would be devastating, because basically what it says is the country is going, oh, you know, we turned away from Jacinda, but actually we didn't realize what we were turning towards. These guys are better anyway. You know what I mean? It would be devastating. I think it's statistically unlikely because it doesn't happen, but gosh, it would be interesting to see what would happen if it did.
There is one question here, and it's a short question, but I think it's pertinent to address it. How? It's a big job, right? You're just one person. I think the answer to that is to be proactive and to get involved. Like, if you believe in a political party's point of view and you want to support them, maybe your one vote isn't enough, because there's enough things out there that are doing what they can to bend the scales in their direction so their vote counts for more. So it could be actually joining a political party. It could be volunteering for your local candidate. It could be talking to your friends and family and making sure that they vote. You know, it's all of those things. We talked in the last election how little engagement there is at the youth end of the spectrum. And those guys are staring down the barrel of the consequences that are being made now. It is exactly right. It's Eat Christchurch Kia. It is grassroots. It is exactly what Chloe's been talking about.
Yeah. That
people need to realise that the government is them. The government is something that happens to you only if you let it. And if you're the person that is making submissions, or sending emails to MPs and letter writing, or even just affecting change in your circle, what you can influence, there is a flow-on effect of that. You know, think about your local ratepayers groups, right? They are havens of older right-wing, no money should be spent on nice things or kids or whatever groups. It's that sort of stuff that changes things. But yeah, putting it in the too hard basket and going, I can't make any change, I'll just do my vote once every 3 years. Maybe this time round, if we don't want National Act and New Zealand First to get a second term, that's what we have to do. We'll talk on this some more later.
We shall continue this conversation. Nakora C says of the last conversation, I think, your employer is not your friend, even if they smile when you're hitting targets. Join a union. This message is paid for with a Union 1 bonus.
Yep.
There you go. I agree.
Yep.
I agree. Right, let's get on to our last story of the day. Now, what we're going to do with this actually is have a look at about 60 seconds, maybe a bit more, of the story from last night. So this is from last night's One News. Then we'll go into what's been said today, because this kind of gives it quite a good nutshell. Because remember, this is the government and these are the parties of law and order. And this is the Prime Minister, and these are the leaders who have been saying, we've got to keep our police from going overseas. We've got to keep our nurses. We've got to keep our teachers. Mr. Luxon is the then opposition leader who sat on television breakfast, and when basically led down the path by the host to say the reason they're leaving is because of salary increases in Australia. And when he was asked, will you increase the salaries? I think that was for teachers. He wouldn't answer that. He refused to answer it. You know, he did his squirrel and looked away. So if you're going to be the party of law and order, if you're going to make promises around gang patches and around, ram raids, and all, you are building a relationship where you need to rely on the police. So therefore, you need to treat them like gold, right? These are your they're basically the people who are carrying out what you've promised to the country would happen. You need to keep them in New Zealand, right? And you need to treat them like gold. Yeah, funnily enough, this government's not doing that.
When it comes to crime, politicians have been beating their chests.
Today, I'm announcing tougher sentences for criminals.
For too long, gangs have been allowed to behave as if they are above the law.
I think the gangs understand that there's a different government in place now.
But the officers they're relying on to enforce their new rules aren't happy because of their pay.
Farcical, demoralising, disgusting, an absolute joke. These are how these officers feel. I've never seen police officers as angry as they are now.
We are on their side, and we do back them.
The offer police have rejected includes a $5,000 pay increase backdated to November, a 4% pay increase in September this year, and another 4% in 2025.
If you think it's just officers being greedy, a 6-year social worker and a nurse that's been in the role for 6 years will earn $22,000 more than a police constable who's been in the role 6 years.
He says many are struggling to make ends meet.
Struggling to pay their rent, to pay their mortgage, to put food on the table. You've got others that are going to food banks.
Do you think New Zealanders would be shocked to hear that police officers are having to go to food banks?
I think they'd be stunned.
This officer, a single parent who wants to remain anonymous, living that reality.
Okay, sorry, I was looking at the wrong number. So there you go. So this is the story from last night that kind of broke a bunch of this. Police officers having to go to food banks, yada, yada, yada. Now, whether you are a fan of the police or not, this is kind of about, for me at least, about the government who swore black and thin blue line that they're going to be the people who keep our public servants, which includes the police, and also who are going to be the government of law and order and fixing up law and order, which is kind of essential to have the police on side for that. And what they're doing, I've got some interview to play with Chris Cahill from this morning, is they're not doing that. In fact, it's said in this interview that Labor gave the police a better offer, Chewy. Isn't that weird? How this is the government of law and order, yet Labor were giving a better offer to the police.
Look, I'm glad to see that the discussion is linking around similar type of workers, right? Police, teachers, nurses, right? They're paid directly by the government. They're vital to how this country runs. Now, whatever you think of the police, I think they look at it from a worker's point of view. Imagine you've been in a negotiation for a pay rise, and you get one, and you're like, "Hey, we're not happy with that. You know, we'll give you some time to come up with a better offer." And they go away for a few months. The guy coming back with the offer, his face changes, and you get okay. So you know we've always backed you guys, right? We've been very pro police, very very pro law and order. So anyway, we've come up with a super good deal, and they take the sheet off the deal, and it's the same one. How pissed are you? I'm shocked by the idea of a full-time police constable going to a food bank. That's fucking crazy. And yeah, the same problem that we have with teachers, the same problem that we have with nurses. They're getting lured overseas by better paying conditions. If you want to stop people doing that, you need to offer them better paying conditions. That's just, I think, basic math. But when they've campaigned so hard on we're the party of law and order, they're going to ask police to do more against more dangerous characters.
Yeah.
And they're not going to give them more money to do it. I mean, surely a mercenary like Mark Mitchell would understand that you need to pay people to put themselves in harm's way. Like, all of these parties are always, we want so many new cops on the beat. It's never. Have you noticed that change in language? It's new cops. It's not more cops.
Yeah.
Let's get that churn going. So we have less operational experience. We have less institutional knowledge because we're training these people. We're training them to a good standard, good enough for other countries to snipe them. But we're not keeping them. And every time we we don't keep someone in that job, we've wasted that investment in training them. We've wasted everything that they've learned after they got trained. It is bad economics.
Speaking of economics, what didn't come up in that thing, and it's going to come up now, is obviously as well, all of this, the negotiations for wage increases and stuff, is on the back of the government giving millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars back to landlords and tax cuts. Now, I just worked it out. There's about 10,500 police officers in New Zealand. That $800 million hole, just that one hole in that one policy, divided by 10,500 is $76,000. Now, obviously, they're not going to give all of that to police officers, but just to go to show how the money they're giving away, the government is giving away, could easily add 10, 15 grand onto each officer. Like, what's that? 10,500, what about, say, times 15,000, just out of interest, is 157 million. So about 1/6 of their $800 million hole. Now, again, I'm not saying they'd give them all straight 15 grand, but you can see how the money we're talking about that this government is giving to other places or not taking in taxes could actually physically go to making nurses, teachers, police officers, ambulance officers, public servants more comfortable, and that's what they need to keep them here. So all the money you're giving away in tax, right, could be going back to people who you're saying have to stay here, who won't stay here because the money's no good, but you're giving away the money that could be given to them to make their money better. Do you see the cycle, Mr. Luxon?
But they're all, I mean, surely you'd call a beat cop your sort of entry-level police constable, that sort of thing. They're a backroom worker, right? They're not frontline. Not a frontline worker that we value. Like it's just crazy. I think about these jobs, cops, teachers, nurses. Like often these are jobs where people have been attracted to for a long time because they want to make a change, right? Yep. Teachers want to make a change. Nurses want to make a change. Police want to make a change. And that sort of drive to do that sort of job will mean that you put up with a lot. Like the shit that nurses put up with, the long hours that teachers do, and the absolute bullshit that cops have to put up with. Why would you put up with that job if your pay also sucks?
Yeah. How much would you have to get paid to be possibly shot at every day? Like what would that paycheck have to look like?
How much do I need to have someone else's bodily fluids on me without my consent?
Oh, some people pay for that, Joey, let alone get paid.
I had to put in the consent thing there because consent is sexy. The bar is pretty high. I don't want to be scrubbing puke out of a patrol car or having to wash my sneakers every couple of days because there's blood and piss all over them. Pay the people that have to wash their shoes because of blood, piss, and vomit more. I think that everyone can agree with that, right?
Yeah, and look, just so people know, minimum wage is about minimum hourly rate is about 47,000. The average wage in New Zealand at the moment is about 90. A first-year police officer earns $67,000. The average annual salary for an officer working in their 5th year is $74,000. So that's the money you're talking. They're not even at the average wage in New Zealand.
I'm really close to that, and I sit on a stool every day and tell people how to log into Facebook.
All right.
That's ridiculous. And when we look at these things, like people go, oh, we can't afford the nice things. We can't afford free lunches for kids or free public transport or anything like that. We can't afford these frivolities. Now you can add to the frivolity frontline policing. We can't afford that. You fucking can. You know who has the money. You know who has the money, and we know how much money we can raise out of them if we put some focus on them, and we can have these nice things like nurses that don't feel like they have to quit and move countries, and police going to food banks. That's crazy. That's a crazy world that we're living in. That's not the New Zealand that any of us want.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to Chris Cahill. He was on Breakfast this morning, Police Association President. First clip is basically just him telling us that the police are unhappy and why.
Well, Chris joins us now. Chris, clearly you don't mince your words. Were you surprised by this offer?
Yeah, Marina. Well, they're actually the words of our members. That's the sort of feedback we got from our members, but I agree with them. Look, we're really surprised. We've been waiting over a year to try and get something on the table that's meaningful for our officers. We've been mucked around by successive governments. When they put their offer on the table, they then didn't backdate it fully to when the collective ran out. So that $5,000 might sound good. It's actually closer to $3,000 due to the not backdating. And again, that 4%, when it should kick in 1 July this year, they've moved it to 1 September. They've also put a number of clawbacks in there. One example, detectives would lose about $1,100 a year. So there's a lot of hidden stuff in here, and it just doesn't go close to addressing the issues that our members have asked to be addressed.
How more disappointing is it that it came from one of your own?
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, you know, Mark's been a big supporter of the police, but he's got to front up. You know, he's come out. He said, we're going to crack down on the gangs. We're going to, shut the youth crime down. We're going to lower the road toll. All these things are putting more demand on officers. They're going to have to work harder. They're going to have to work longer. Well, there's a quid pro quo to that, and that is for him to go back to the Minister of Finance, Prime Minister, and get us a better package.
There you go. He wants a better package. So there's step number one. We'll go straight into the second clip, shall we? Because the second clip talks more about Mark Mitchell, and it's actually a clip of him talking about trying to deflect the tax breaks for landlords conversation. So TVNZ, said we've got some footage from yesterday when we talked to him, and this is what he had to say. So this is exactly what I was talking about. We've got these tax breaks for landlords going back, billions of dollars being taken out of the economy whilst we're paying public servants shit money.
They're two entirely separate things. What we've said is that we want to strengthen our economy, and when you're talking about renters, the problem that we've got there is that people that are renting houses have had a massive increase in their rent, and we're in a cost of living crisis. So literally often every dollar matters, and so that is why we're dealing with that issue. The pay negotiation obviously is a separate issue, and that is us as an incoming government in a tough economic position, trying to do the best that we can.
He's the first one, Mark Mitchell, that I've thought maybe he doesn't understand. Like all the other ones, I go, they know, they're just choosing not to understand it. But he might be the first one that doesn't quite get it, that the not taking as much tax money in means you can't put as much out, whether it's from sector A or sector Z. If you've got money coming into the pot and then less money comes into the pot, then you've got less you can put out. So to say it's a very different situation, as I said, he may be the first one that I would believe if he said he didn't understand it. The first one, Drew. This has got about 45 seconds. I'll get to the end,
And through a good faith process with the association.
So, Chris, a tough economic position the government is in. Is that a good enough excuse?
Well, they've got choices. I mean, cost of living crisis, they're dead right. Police officers are facing that as well, I got a report yesterday.
Good answer.
Officers, both in the police, have had to move home to live with their parents so they can get renters in to actually pay their mortgage. Others that have got $50 to spare a fortnight after paying their mortgage and their rates.
And just on this, Chewy, not casting any aspersion over any police officer, but, some illegal activity going on that if you could look the other way might slip you $500 a week in your pocket. You can just see how some people might feel they're a police officer, they've got a Glock on their waist, but they still may feel desperate enough financially to make stupid decisions. I mean, if you don't pay them enough to do their job to live comfortably, they may look for income elsewhere, whether that's through legal means or illegal means. And these people who are running into the criminal community all the time, I'm sure have lots of opportunities that come before them to, make a bit here and there, and they're choosing not to, going, well, these guys have got their $1 million apartments and that, and I'll just go back to my $50 a week left over after everything's paid. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Historically, we have really low corruption levels in New Zealand. And yeah, you've absolutely nailed it on the head. It is an excellent answer to point out that all of the things that he's saying is reasons that they can't pay cops are the issues that cops are dealing with as well. Cops are renters. Cops have to use the supermarkets, all of that sort of thing. Because crazy, look, this might knock you off your chair. Cops are people.
And they live in our community, apparently.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's like they've forgotten that. It's funny. We can use the police as a jingoistic bumper sticker in an election year, but again, we won't think past that. You know, these platitudes of like, oh, we value the work that you do. And when we say we value the work with it, we don't value it obviously with money, because that's crazy. We know that the landlords are out there doing the hard mahi. They're the guys that really need to be rewarded for their hard work of renting out 100-year-old leaky villas to people. And just, you know, you've got to set a date on your calendar that you've got to put the rent up every 12 months. It's a hard life. So sorry, cops, get in line.
All right, let's get to the end of this. It's 30 seconds to go, then we've got one more clip after it.
Others who are paying $1,400 a fortnight in rent and gives them very little money left to look after their 2 children. Things like this. Government has choices. They've chosen to give landlords a tax break. So it's a choice they made. So they can also make a choice to give police officers an appropriate lift in pay. And look, to give you an idea, we're not being greedy. A 6-year constable in the police, so been in there 6 years, will earn $22,000 less than a nurse that's been in 6 years. So there's a big disparity going on here that needs to be addressed.
You know what National's going to do, eh? You know what they're going to do? How they're going to
pay the nurses less.
They're going to drop the nurse's salary by $22,000 in the 6th year, and then everyone's going to get paid the same. Wouldn't surprise me. Brooke van Velden comes out with that tomorrow. I'm going to go straight to this last bit because it's only 28 seconds long. The question gets asked, how does this current offer compare to Labor's offer?
Well, it's actually lower because the previous offer kicked in from the 1st of April. So this one doesn't kick in till the 1st of November. So that takes about close to $2,000 away from it straight away. The previous offer had about $600 for a medical health check every year, which is really important if you want to keep officers fit and on the front line.
Crazy.
That's been taken away.
Frivolity.
And then there's a number of clawbacks that have been introduced into it that weren't there previously. So it's actually a lower offer.
There you go. So, you know, that party of communists and anarchists, those guys who we threw out because they weren't they were offering the police a better deal than their supposed party of laws. Chewy, yours, sir.
Nakora C points out the police are on the right side of the picket line for once. Look, there's lots of criticism we could level at the police historically for lots of things that they do.
Sure.
And certainly historically against the labour unions, yes, they've always been on the wrong side of it. But you know what? Sometimes you got to say, you stick your hand up and go, you know, it's right in this particular instance. When we look at what the issue is that they have been used as a political tool, and they are not getting any reward for it. I just want to go, Cole. You guys knew that this was going to happen because we could see it.
Yeah, of course.
Like your police minister is one of the first mercenaries in existence that doesn't realize that he needs to pay his people.
Mark Mitchell.
Mercenary man.
Yeah. All right, team. Anything else in the chat we need to get to? Because that's pretty much our stories.
I did. Nakora's
on fire,
dropping bombs today. Don't worry, cops, just become landlords. Maybe then the government will care about you.
There you go. Beautiful.
Rob Hallstrom says, as the common idiom goes, anything can be achieved by one of 3 ways: fast and good but expensive, fast and cheap but terrible, cheap and good but slow. It is very rare that anything can be all 3. Absolutely. And yeah, that's it. That's what I've got. That's my story.
Well, as I said earlier, I managed to connect with Anita from, I think it's from First Union, and she has agreed to come on tomorrow night. So we will continue this conversation, and we'll find out more about it because, you know, I think, Chewy, a word that you just used then which resonated with me was worker. You know, police officers, love them or hate them, are still workers. And I think one of the differences between where I sit on the left and many I see on the right is I can have empathy and care for someone who's in a sector of society that I might not align with or be that favourable of. So even if you are a police officer, and even if we have, as Chewy said, some historical grievances with you, I still don't want to see you screwed over by a government, just like I don't want to see the factory floor worker be screwed over by a government. So I'm keen to keep talking about this.
There is traditionally a great difficulty talking about police when you're talking about labor rights and labor movements, because traditionally police have been used as a tool of enforcement, a tool of breaking strikes and breaking up unions and spying on people and generally, you know, the whole idea of police really is to protect property. You know, and I understand there's a lot of people on the left that have that point of view, and I want to acknowledge it, and it's fucking valid. The realist in me is sitting here going, I don't want to. Well, I would accept a world without cops, but there is a long way to go societally, and just from a humanity point of view before we get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the things that we need to look at is, as you said, a well-paid policeman is an uncorruptible policeman.
Well, 99%, yeah. You can always find the bad apple. Yeah. Although that's a strange saying, that one bad apple spoils the bunch. You know, people use that quite a lot. They don't use it correctly, because what it means is the whole bunch is spoiled. But people use it as there's only one bad person. But you think about it. But listen to it again. One bad apple spoils the bunch. So the whole bunch of apples are spoiled because of one. It doesn't mean only one bad apple and the rest are in perfect mint condition. So anyway, that was a little tangent there into grammar.
No, I love little sayings like that are misconstrued or misquoted. You know, I think I've mentioned my favorite one on the show. The customer is always right. Do you know the rest of it?
No, what's the rest of it?
The customer is always right in matters of taste.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
But everybody forgets that. So the customer is always right. And whenever I've been on the receiving end of that, my brain goes, so if the customer is always right, then I'm always wrong. That doesn't feel correct.
So therefore I can't fix your phones because I'm wrong.
Yeah, the full quote is the customer is always right in matters of taste.
Well, there you go. Learn with Chewy. It's our new segment every Wednesday night to wrap the show up. All right, team. Back tomorrow night from whatever time we start. What time do we start? Something like 9 o'clock.
Oh, usually 9.
9-ish. We get here at about 3 minutes to 9, something like that. And we'll catch you then. As I said, you have a guest coming along, and that's about it, I think, for me. I can't think. Sorry, my brain's doing 3 things at once. So we'll catch you tomorrow night from 9 o'clock. Stay safe, everybody. Remember, come back tomorrow night, bring a friend, share our stuff around, follow us on YouTube, like and subscribe. And also, if you're out tomorrow, you're going for a walk or a jog, why don't you try listening to the Apple podcast, the audio version of this, to see how that rolls differently with you. But until then, we'll catch you tomorrow night. Hooroo, team.
Mā te wā.